few months ago, someone gave me the book, Never Split the Difference, and started reading it, and immediately said, wow. And so today, we're very fortunate to have with us Chris Voss. Chris, come on down. I put this quote up here from the book. A successful negotiator has to get everything they ask for without giving anything back of substance, and do so in a way that leaves your counterpart feeling as if they have a great relationship. Now, who would like to acquire that skill? Let me ask the question again in a different way. Who would like to acquire that skill? On that note, Chris, they're all yours.
Thank you. All right. All right, it's very cool to be here today. Let's try a quick little exercise, all right? I want everybody to stand up, please. All right, I want you to get a nice, solid stance, feet about shoulder width apart, feel very grounded. Make a fist, arms at 90-degree angles. Put your right thumb up, put your left forefinger out. Now switch. Switch back. Switch again. Switch back. Speed it up, faster. All right, thank you very much. All right, so what was the point of that? Did you need to be Albert Einstein to understand what I was asking you to do? Was it complicated? Do you need a Nobel Prize? Is some technological breakthrough there? But was it easy? No. It was, and the barrier to learn, the barrier to change is awkwardness. It was awkward. Now, the hostage negotiation skills that work, some of them actually kind of like Jedi mind tricks, they're not complicated. But the first couple times you do them, they're going to feel awkward. There's some interesting brain science now that backs this stuff up now. Sometimes I will, when I'm training somebody, I'll stop and I'll say these exact 4 words. Say them. Because, and they'll resist, but and sometimes I'll say, write it down. What happens on a new skill every time that you say it, and then I'll say, finish the sentence, is it actually creates a new neural pathway in the brain. And the first time you're doing it, the first time you're doing this, you are actually in a process of creating a new neural pathway in your brain. If you went and practiced it in a little while, and there's actually a finite amount of practice, every single time you go down that neural pathway, it goes faster the next time. Faster, 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 faster. Emotional intelligence, hostage negotiation is emotional intelligence on steroids. Stuff that we found out worked in hostage negotiation, we found out it worked 40, 50 years ago. Now the brain science is there, backs it up, tells us that, the class I used to teach, I used to say, do this because I said. I've been doing it for a long time, I said, just do it. Now the brain science backs it up. A couple things that I heard beforehand that I really liked. Pete, the strategy guy, said, you're in a trust business. What business was I in? Yeah, I was in a trust business. So when I first wanted to become a hostage negotiator, I'm a former SWAT guy, I'm a recovering SWAT guy. And I had no background. I went to the woman that was in charge of the hostage negotiation team, FBI New York City, Amy Bondurant. And I say this with the most reverence. Tough New York chick, my kind of girl. And by the way, I grew up in Iowa. I know the accent doesn't sound like it, but I did. It's a long story, kidnapped by gypsies, all that. So I go to Amy, and I'd been on the SWAT team. I'd been on a SWAT team in Pittsburgh, and I tried out for the FBI's version of the Navy SEALs. It was just a hostage rescue team, re-injured my knee. And knew that every SWATter's got a shelf life, like a professional athlete. You keep doing it until you get hurt too many times, and you can't do it anymore. And I thought, well, let's not blow the knee out completely. let me do something in crisis response. So I knew we had hostage negotiators. And I thought, how hard could that be? I talk to people all the time. I can talk to terrorists. Yeah, and that's a little bit of the background I grew up in. Small town in Iowa, Midwestern blue-collar background, son of Richard and Joyce Voss. And my son and I like the kid that the Voss, unofficial Voss family motto is, how hard could it be? Which is not quite the redneck saying like, hey, watch this. We usually don't die. But I said, how hard could it be? So I went to Amy, and we were both assigned to the terrorism branch, and I kind of walked up to her and I went, ta-da! She kind of looked down her glasses at me and said, okay. Want to be a hostage negotiator, huh? Yeah. She says, you got any training? Nope. Okay. Got any psychology degrees? Nope. Okay. You were a cop before, right? Yeah. Were you a hostage negotiator in the police department? Nope. She says, just go away. and I'm sure I didn't stay at my feet and go, but come on. But I know that's how I felt. I was like, no, what do you mean go away? I want to do this. She said, I don't care. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to be a hostage negotiator. You and everybody else. Go away. I said, no, seriously, there's got to be something I could do. She said, there is. Go volunteer to suicide hotline. Now go away until you've done that. And I went and volunteered. And 5 months later, I came back and I said, hey, just wanted you to know I've been on a hotline for about 5 months. And she's like, you're kidding. I'm like, no. She says, which one? Helpline. That's why I volunteered. Yeah, you know, Jim, you know, these people. Happened to be a suicide hotline that was attributed to being founded by Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking. It was really founded by his wife, Ruth Stafford Peale. It was her idea, and she had no problem getting her husband to do stuff. She was a classic, you know, behind every successful man is a powerful woman, and they were a great combination, Ruth Stafford Peale, Norman Vincent Peale, and just, you know, probably one of the original power couples ever. But I volunteered there, and I couldn't believe that she couldn't believe that I went there. And it's a little bit of, you know, what you're getting today. Ask the people who know how to do it. Ask them what to do, and then do it. Sounds really stupid. And unfortunately, it's just, I went back, when I wrote the book, I went back to Amy because her name wasn't out there publicly, and FBI pre-publication review says you got to go to certain people and get their permission to put their name in the book. Otherwise, leave their name out. And I said, I'm not leaving Amy's name out. She brought me in. Because after I volunteered on the hotline, there were literally 5 people in line in front of me. She jumped me past everybody. She said, when I went to her, said, I want to put your name in the book. I said, she said, you know, I must have told 1,000 people to do that. 2 of them did. You were one of them. Simple stuff. Real simple stuff. So, what do we do that's different than what you're doing? By the way, if you walk in the men's room, you catch me doing this, you know why. I'm not signaling anybody in there, all right? I gotta practice before I come on stage. I don't want to screw it up. So, we got this great video that we run all the time where it's a simulation of a bunch of FBI agents getting ready for this boring training, and there are new people in the office, and one of the new guys is a SWAT guy. And he gets introduced to another guy in the office while they're sitting waiting for the boring speaker. And the guy gets introduced to is a hostage negotiator. And the SWAT guy looks at the hostage negotiator and says, yeah, really? So what do you say if some guy's got a gun and he says, I need a car in 60 seconds or she dies? What do you say? If I were to ask some of you to role play with me right now, and I was a bank robber, and I asked you to be a hostage negotiator, and I said, here's what you can't do. You can talk about anything you want. You can't give me transportation, you can't give me weapons, you can't give me drugs or alcohol, you can't exchange hostages. I looked at you and I said, you're the hostage negotiator, I'm a hostage taker. Yeah, don't look at him. I need a car in 60 seconds or she dies. What would you say? Can I phone a friend, right? And we do that exercise. And I interact with people, and I show people how to turn the 60 seconds into all the time that you need. I read a video 1,000 times, and there were certain things that stuck out in front of me that before I ever really saw it, and it was the thing that sold my book to the publisher. And it had to do with the question that the guy who wrote my proposal stumped me on. Because not once does the hostage negotiator try to get the other person to say yes. Not once. And the title of the chapter, it's a slightly different title now, but when it originally went into the publisher, was yes is the last thing you want to hear. And when we were talking about this concept with my co-writer at the time, the book ends up, the guy who wrote the book is a guy named Tahlraz, T-A-H-L-R-A-Z. Write anything about business, read anything about business he's written. He's the world champion business book writer. He also is co-writer of a book called Never Eat Alone, 2005. Keith Ferrazzi, there are probably people in the room here that know Keith because Keith lives here in town. Greatest networking book ever written. Tal was a co-writer of that book. And I used to carry that book around to people I was going to work with and say, write it like this. Finally, I got the guy that wrote it like that. But the guy before him that did the proposal, he said, when you were a hostage negotiator, how'd you get people to say yes? That was the only question he ever asked me that I was thoroughly stumped at, because I said, no, we don't. It's a useless word. It does me no good. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is your addiction to yes. Hi, I'm a realtor. I haven't said yes in 28 days. You know, we're not one of those kind of meetings, right? But you're addicted to yes. Sorry. And that's the biggest thing that you're going to have trouble getting out of. And here's how this happens, for a couple of reasons. There's this nonsense out there called, one of the phrases for getting somebody to say yes a whole bunch of times on a road to get to what you want, there's an academic term for it, it's called mere agreement. And there's a study out there that says that mere agreement works. So anytime somebody refers to an academic study, don't just stop at saying there's an academic study. Take a look at the study. And the study is, it says if you get people to say yes to little yeses, it's more likely they'll say yes to the big yes. Now, I'm not here telling you that you'll never make a deal doing that. I'm just here telling you that's a horrible batting average. And the study is taking place among students in an academic environment that are in role-play situations, and they're trying to make deals. And I teach at USC and I teach at Georgetown, and I know the shortcomings of those deals. So that's why I make my students do the majority of their negotiations outside in the real world. I let them do some inside, but I say you got to test drive this stuff in the real world. So I know the shortcomings of simulated negotiations, and their shortcomings are huge. And that's one of the things that mere agreement is based on. But you can Google it, and they call it momentum selling. They call it yesable propositions. They call it the yes momentum. And you can find no shortage of stuff out there that'll tell you that it's good, yeah. And they call the yeses tie downs. Now seriously, somebody's trying to tie you down, and you like that? We didn't even bother with it as hostage negotiators. Example, how do you feel when the phone rings and you pick up the phone and they say, have you got a few minutes to talk? You automatically go, yes, thank God you called. And then if they say, would you like to make more money? Oh my God, yes, thank God you called. No. Here's the problem with have you got a few minutes to talk. First of all, there's 4 questions. Number 1, if I have a few minutes, do I want to talk to you? If I have a few minutes, I don't want to talk to you. Do I want to talk about what you want to talk about? You know, there ain't a man alive, or woman probably, who hasn't got a call from their significant other and a voice on the phone, the most important person on the entire planet, and a voice says, "Can we talk?" And the man says to himself, "Well, I like talking to you, but somehow I know I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about." Then after that is, how long is a few minutes? My next younger sister, she calls me on the phone, says, "Have you got a few minutes to talk?" She calls when she's got an hour drive in front of her. And it's going to be, she talks and I listen, which is also code for, "Have you got a few minutes to talk?" Shut up while I speak. And the last one is, how do I get off the phone? Now, we have been hammered with this yes thing so much that if it ever worked, we're now like battered children. Nobody tries to get you to say yes to anything unless they're taking you someplace. We're in Los Angeles, right? What if we are? Nobody tries to get you, even if you're trying to confirm, there's three kinds of yeses: commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit. And so many people try to lead us into the commitment yes by the confirmation yes that people get really good at the counterfeit yes. One of my students at USC is trying to set up his honeymoon. He's going to a luxury resort. He's going in the off season. He knows it's the off season. He knows what they do at the luxury resort is they offer discount on the regular rooms, but they don't offer discounts on the bungalows, and the bungalows are largely empty. Now, he wants to negotiate a deal with the manager of the resort. He wants a deal on a bungalow, which he knows they're not offering, and he also knows that they're empty because it's the off season. So all he wants to do is confirm an innocent fact. It's the off season, right? That's like what month it is, what day it is, what planet we're on. The manager knows it's going someplace. Nobody ever tries to get you to say yes unless it's going someplace. Our guard goes up instantly. And we're so battered by this. We're all so battered by this. Like, I'm on a plane a few months ago between LA and New York, and I'm a very strategic flyer. So I've taken the time to make sure that I have a middle seat in economy. Some planning, right? It's a 5-hour flight, so I got to get up, finally use the restroom. Nice lady sitting next to me. "I'm sorry, can I get up?" I get up and I go in the back. And when I come out, I see she's still standing in the aisle. And I'm like, awesome, it's a 5-hour flight. She doesn't want to sit down right away. You know, you got to get up and move around. But I don't want to be rude. I want to make sure this is okay with her. And so I walk up to her and I say, "I'm guessing you want to sit down right away." She looks at me and she looks down. She looks at me and she looks down. She goes, "I want to read my book." And she's worried about what's it going to mean if she says yes. What does she let herself in for? There used to be a parking lot in Washington, D.C. when I lived in D.C. It's the stupidest thing. It was, they finally took it down because of renovation of the waterfront. So this parking lot had a machine, $8 cash to get in, didn't take credit cards, exact change only, and no time limit. What does that mean? I once parked my motorcycle there for 4 months for $8. So the locals that lived around there, who worked in the area, knew about this, and so they always going and parking there because it was $8 all day. And inevitably there'd be somebody that wasn't familiar with it, and there's sign, cash only, $8, exact change, cash only. And there'd be somebody right up there trying to put a credit card in a machine that's 60 years old. And I jump out, I walk up, it's a nice lady sitting in a car, and I want to help her out. I look at her and I'm saying, "Do you have $8 cash?" And she goes, "What if I do?" I mean, to convince yourself of this finally, last of not this weekend, tomorrow, go to your favorite mall, go to your favorite store, probably Nordstrom's, right? I don't know what it is, but stand right outside and stop people just as they go in and say, "Do you like shopping at Nordstrom's?" I bet they don't go in. I bet if they go in, they look over their shoulders so much that they leave without buying anything. I bet if you do that for half an hour, security comes out and asks you to leave. Like, you'll be stunned. I mean, just look for it. Look for it in different little places. It's such an addiction. And it becomes an addiction because, yes, has been designated as the most beautiful word in the English language, if not any language. We love to hear it. Oh, God, it feels so good when we hear it. And there's an interesting story that John Lennon first began to fall in love with Yoko Ono because he went to an art exhibit that she put together, and she climbed over, and it was in it like an obstacle course. And you crawled around on this stuff, and then finally you came to this ladder, and you crawled up this ladder, and you looked through a telescope, and on a far wall was, in tiny little letters, was the word, yes. And we love to hear it so much, we forget in an instant, in the very instant when you're trying to get somebody to say yes, if I try to get you to say yes, you'll back up. So we didn't even bother with this. It was never even a topic of conversation in hostage negotiation. Never but, because yes, first, one of my rules is yes is nothing without how. And we were in a trust business. The first major siege that I ever got involved in, negotiated bank robbery with hostages in Brooklyn, 6,000 years ago. And interestingly enough, even though they happen in the movies all the time, a bank robbery where they actually negotiate hostages out happens in the entire country about once every 20 years. They're rare events. When we did the one in New York, the last one before that was 20 years earlier, and it was Dog Day Afternoon, the movie with Al Pacino. And that's New York. That's how often they happen in New York. When was the last time you heard of a bank robbery with hostages in Los Angeles? And they like robbing banks in these towns, so it just doesn't happen. I was a second negotiator on the phone. I started in with hostage negotiation techniques. The first guy was a highly manipulative type. I had learned how to deal with highly manipulative types on the telephone, on the hotline. When I finally got trained as a negotiator from my time at the hotline, I said, I've been doing this for a year. I just didn't have a SWAT team outside. But he was actually the extremely manipulative businessman. And it was a business transaction. He wasn't really sure how to deal with me, so he actually hands the phone off to another guy. A minute and a half in, the other guy, who doesn't realize I'm not the first negotiator, first guy up was a guy named Joe. They handed it off to me with some specific instructions. I got on the phone, I just started doing my suicide hotline thing, my late night FM DJ voice. And a minute and a half in, before he knew my name, the guy literally says to me on the phone, I trust you, Joe. Before he even knew my name, he trusted me. It's an interesting sequence. There's a whole nother set of psychological impact things around names. I would tell you that I would teach you to use names differently than you're using them now. Talking to a realtor just a couple of weeks ago, one day training we had here in town, he says, we sit down, you know, I'm having trouble getting these phone calls returned. I'm having trouble getting phone calls returned. We do all the research, we get to know everything we can about our potential clients, we get to know everything we can about these people, and I'm having trouble getting phone calls returned. And I said, say that again? He said, having trouble getting phone calls returned? He looked at me like, what are you, stupid? It's pretty much straight English, right? I said, no. What'd you say before that? What are you doing? He said, well, we get to know everything we can about him. He said, that's your problem. What do they know about you? You know, I said, it's easy for them not to return your calls. They got no idea who you are. You're just some schmuck leaving messages on their voicemail. Your whole desire to get to know them, you didn't do it in a way where it was a two-way street, and where them getting to know you was even more important. And there's a lot of little subtle, tiny ways that you do this stuff, the way we construct what we say. I'll give you two different stories and they'll feel completely different. When I became an FBI hostage negotiator, I went through the training at Quantico, which is a mystical place. It really is. And I'm going through the training. It was one of the best training I ever went through. And while I was there, I began to hear about these guys that traveled internationally, working kidnappings, and they all over the world, saving people's lives. And the more I heard about these guys, and I finally heard that these guys were on the SINT team, the Critical Incident Negotiation team. By the end of the week, they gave a presentation. And when I came out of there, I knew I wanted to be on the SINT team. Now, let me tell you the story a different way. When you become an FBI hostage negotiator, you go to the training at Quantico and you find yourself in a mystical place, this mystical place at Quantico, where lives are transformed. And you begin to find out about these people that travel all over the world, saving people's lives on international kidnappings. And you find out that these guys are members of the SINT team. And by the end of the training, you know you want to be one of the members of the SINT team. The second story felt more personal, didn't it? Engaged you more. Because I know that each word has a different emotional impact. And it's not that the word has a bad impact, it's the context it's in. I switch from I to you. When we're teaching people to interact, a lot of people have been taught appropriately, like when they're trying to confirm something they've heard from the other side, they say, what I'm hearing is, well, that's a misuse of the word I. Instead, if I say, you sound like, I've immediately plugged the word you in instead of I, and I began to engage them in a very different way. There's a lot of little things that I was taught how to do that as a hostage negotiator. Then when I started to teach it and began to see it in other ways and learn things in other areas, I began to understand the difference of the impact of those words. Every question has an impact. Every time you try to get somebody to say yes, you create anxiety in that person. Every time. So you got to get out of that. I'll give you one of the ways. This is going to sound stupid. And we haven't quite got the brain science that backs it up all now, but the dumbest thing, the simplest thing, is you can get exactly what you want by getting somebody to say no. When you guys get home, when you get back to your office, when you get out of here, write down the questions that you normally like to ask people. The majority of them will be yes questions. Your first step in breaking your addiction would be simply to switch it to the other side. Give you an example. 2 years ago, Jack Welch was coming through Los Angeles. He and his wife, Susie, their recent book, The Real Life MBA. They're doing a book signing. I'm going to go to the book signing. I want to ask Jack Welch to come and speak in my class at USC. I've had some really interesting people come in and speak. So, how many people try to get Jack Welch to say yes to something in that book signing? How many people there? 250, 300 people? Hey, Jack, come to my kid's birthday party. Hey, Jack, you want to come over to the house for dinner? Everybody that speaks to him. So there are two problems here. Book signing, a bunch of people for an author as popular as Jack Welch. Long line. They're running you through like an assembly line, right? Before you get there, they give you a little coupon, write your name on it. That way, Jack says, hey, nice to see you, Chris. Good luck. Next. They got a logistical problem. Problem one. What's problem two? Jack Welch is a legitimate celebrity. They don't know who I am. There's no background investigation. There's no metal detector. They don't know I'm not a disgruntled former shareholder of GE that lost my life savings when I shorted GE stock and Jack Welch took it up. Right? Jane Fonda. A few years ago, she's at a book signing for one of her Vietnam vet, comes up to her and spits right in her face. A legitimate rock star celebrity, I'm going to be within arm's length of this person. He has security. Action is always quicker than reaction. I'm going to get close enough to him. I could do anything I want. They can't stop me. I could come up. I could kiss him on the lips. They don't know what I'm going to do, right? Not that I would kiss Jack Welch on the lips. So how much time do I got with Jack Welch? Probably 5. I walk up to Jack Welch and I say, is it a ridiculous idea for you to come and speak to the class I teach at USC in the Marshall School of Business? And he looks up and to the left. He gets this really intense look on his face. And I think to myself, just killed Jack Welch. He's so angry he had a stroke. He's gonna fall right over. Security's gonna tackle me, they're gonna drag me out in handcuffs. And then when he doesn't unfreeze, and I'm relieved that he hasn't died, but then I'm thinking in my head, he's gonna go, security, security! Instead, he looks at me and he says, this is my personal assistant's name. This is a special Twitter account we have set up to communicate with her. I will call her and let her know that you're going to be reaching out for her. I think we're going to be in Los Angeles in the fall. If we are, we'll come in and we'll speak at your class. How does that happen? Because two things. I did something nobody else is doing. Number one. Number two, I know the psychological, I don't know the psychology, I know the psychological reactions, two different things. I know the way the brain functions. I know the different portions of the brain. I know that we're 6 times more likely to make a deal with somebody we like. I know how to be likable without being vulnerable to needing to be liked. I know how the brain works in negative and positive emotions. I know how those influence your thought patterns. I know how to turn negatives down. I know how to turn positives up. As a hostage negotiator, I learned to listen for the different components in everything everybody says, and there are only about 5. There's not that many. And I know how I can turn each one up and down at will. And I know the rules in the way in the universe of the brain. I know the emotional rules, and there's some always rules. And I know certain things that I can say will always have the same impact. And how much of an impact will that be? Give you just an example on switching from yes to no. One of my students at Georgetown does an experiment because he is on a Republican fundraising committee, a couple of elections back, not the most recent one. And they're dialing for dollars at night. What are they doing? It's cold calling. And what's the cold calling system? Call them on the phone and get 3 yeses in a row. Get your 3 yeses in a row, you've built the yes momentum, you've built mere agreement, you tied them down. Then you ask them the killer question, which is a trap, which they know is coming. And ask for money. That's every cold calling script on the planet is designed to do that. Yes, 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 boom! They take their 3 yes questions and he makes them 3 no questions. Takes the first question, instead of would you like to see the Republicans back in the White House in November? And changes it to have you given up on seeing the Republicans take the White House in November? Changes the 3 yes questions to no questions. They run the 2 scripts side by side. The no script gets a 23% higher rate of return. Only that change nothing else. You're going to get at least 23% more effectiveness. What would that do over the coming year if your batting average raised by 23%? And how much do you got to raise your batting average? I don't know how many baseball fans there are in the room. Any baseball fans? What's the Mendoza line? 200. So for those of you that are not baseball fans, the Mendoza, and I feel bad for this guy. I'm not sure what his first name. I should know his first name. He was a guy that was in and out of the majors, was a phenomenal fielder, but wasn't a great hitter, and always hit around 200, 215. And he kept washing out of the majors, and he couldn't stay in. And actually, my understanding, George Brett, a guy from the Kansas City Royals, joking about him one day, said, I'm trying to stay above the Mendoza line in an interview, and it just caught. So 200, a batting average for Major League Baseball. About 200, 215, or you wash out of the league. What's your batting average got to be in the All-Star game? About 300, right? You hit 300, how much money are you making? A day, right? These are the guys that are signing $150 million contracts, batting 300 and above. How many hits a month do you have to go from the Mendoza line to a $100 million contract? About 9 or 10, exactly right. A month, day after day after day, getting up and going to bat day after day after day. An incremental change takes people from washing out of the league to signing $100 million contracts. Changing from yes to no and doing your wiring, getting a gut instinct on that one alone, probably raise your batting average 23%. There's a bunch of other stuff that I learned from hostage negotiation that's in the book. Share with you in as many ways as we can. Steve's going to talk about how we're going to do that, but that's just one. And back to it, in case you're wondering, none of it's complicated. Just take some rewiring and some practice. If nothing else, if you haven't got the book, just read the reviews on Amazon, what they say. The thing that I loved about it more than anything else is like, wow, just really counterintuitive stuff that was really easy to do. And no shortage of people who are making differences in their negotiations before they finish the first chapter. I wanted it to be usable. That's why I brought Tall in, because he could write a digestible, understandable book. He would put structure to it so that, because I'm the original short attention span theater guy. So I'll get about halfway through a chapter and I'll have to stop because my lips are tired. Boom, boom. But sometimes, especially when you're reading to learn, your brain only has so much capacity in a given day. And if you have a chapter that's 50 pages long and you can't stop 10 pages in, you might not even pick the book up. You can pull this stuff in small doses. When we finished the bank robbery in Brooklyn, we didn't do face-to-face surrenders. So Bobby, the first hostage taker to come out, thought he was surrendering to me personally. I finally got the last bit to get him to come out when I said, I'll meet you outside. And he said, yeah, I want to end this. We had to have him walk into the arms of the SWAT guys because the SWAT guys had the perimeter and they have security control. And as soon as the SWAT guys got their hands on him, he looked up and he said, where's Chris? After he'd surrendered. Kidnapping that I talk about in the Philippines, where we got a hostage walked away, and we thoroughly, in the negotiation, defeated the other side, and they became disheartened. There was originally a $10 million ransom demand. We had one conversation in the middle of that negotiation, which my director of operations, is also my son, refers to as the birth of the that's right moment. And we went from $10 million to zero in one conversation. And we got a that's right. Not a you're right, a that's right. When that was all over, and since our hostages walked away, the terrorists, and they were bad to the bone, head chopping straight out of the movies, bad guys. They got nothing. I'm back in the Philippines about 3 weeks later, and I'm back with the negotiator that I was coaching, and he said, you're not going to believe who called me on the phone. And I'm like, all right, who? And our bad guy's name was Sabaya. He said, Sabaya called me. Really? Sabaya still had my guy's phone number, his undercover phone number, his undercover name. Didn't know who he was, knew he had to be with police or the military. Didn't know his real name. Sabaya calls my guy on the phone 3 weeks after he'd been completely defeated and gotten nothing, and said, "You been promoted yet?" I don't know what you said to me on the phone, but whatever it was, it worked. They should promote you. He hangs up. Remember the Robert De Niro, Billy Crystal movie, Analyze This? De Niro says, you got a gift, you're good. But that's the way to lead people in your interactions. Hostage negotiators, that was our currency. We never knew when we were going to have to face somebody again. And if they lived, that meant either I or one of my colleagues would see them again. So we believed in long-term relationships and reputation and getting everything you want in a negotiation and if the other guy got nothing, but if he didn't get what he was really after, our conceit was we still wanted to have a great relationship with him no matter what, so that we could cross paths with them under any circumstances, whether it would be the next day or in 10 years, and they would remember us and be happy to talk to us again. And that's the way we raise the level of our game, and that's how we continue to save people's lives. Because hostage negotiators then have a reputation of being people you can put your life in their hands. And you can trust them. If you're in a trust game, if you're in a trust business, you can trust the hostage negotiator. So that's the stuff that I teach. And it's kind of cool. You know, it's kind of cool. Your accumulation of relationships and people who want to continue to do business with you and feel connected with you, separate from how the transaction came out. So I dig it. I hope we get a chance to work with you, help you do more stuff.
So let me ask you a question. The book is called Never Split the Difference.
Right.
This audience right here, raise your hands, everybody. Almost every negotiation they're in ends with splitting the difference. Can you talk about that? You know, why do people do that?
So, all right, so when you split the difference, every time you did that, things were beautiful after that, right? No. So splitting the difference never solves any of the problems you're faced with anyway. We think they will. We think it's a hack to move forward. We think it's a quick, short hack. But the vast majority of the time, splitting the difference doesn't address any of the actual problems in the transaction, in either the implementation or coming to an agreement or the follow-on problems. And we think we have an agreement when we split the difference and agreed, and now instead of the problems being over, the problems have just begun. And then you capitulated on something that had nothing to do with solving any of your problems. So if you could solve those problems with a delay that saves time, go a little slower, you go much faster in your transactions. And then you never had to split the difference because it didn't solve your problems anyway. So if it's not going to solve your problems, why do it? Solve the problem separately in other ways.
Why do you think they do that?
Because you think it's going to work. The other issue, too, is there's a fundamental feeling of fairness. You're trying to be fair. And sometimes, and another aspect of it might be, you might not think you're entitled. You know, some of us sell ourselves short. We're worried that maybe we're not entitled to the full amount. We're worried that maybe we don't deserve the full amount. Maybe we're being greedy. We're thinking, you know, they're trying to make a living too. You know, there's probably 3 reasons why we split the difference on a regular basis and it just doesn't work. We're looking for a hack, it didn't solve our problems, we don't think we're worth it, but it doesn't help, it doesn't fix things. If it did, you guys would be holding this seminar and we'd be watching you. It just, and you know, my great example is splitting the difference is like, you know, what should I wear with this suit today? Should I wear black shoes or should I wear brown shoes? So I'll wear one black and one brown.
In the book, a big part of the book is empathetic, tactical empathy, correct?
Right.
What is tactical empathy?
All right, first of all, it's not sympathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is not, oh, I feel bad for you. I know how you feel. Like, stop saying that, please. Empathy is understanding the other side. And if you truly understand empathy, interestingly enough, you'll look out and see how powerful it is. There's some articles out there now called The Dark Side of Emotional Intelligence. It's ridiculously, insanely powerful. True empathy, you know who's best at empathy? Sociopaths. Because empathy is understanding where the other side is coming from, only. So what do we take from that, and why we coined the term tactical empathy? We know so much more about it. I know how the brain functions. I know you have 3 negative thinking buttons in your brain, and you have 1 positive thinking button in your brain. The negative thinking button in your brain is no less than 3 times the size of the positive thinking. So I know tactically how to address that, and I know that the reasons you won't make a deal are 3 times more important than the reasons why you will. So since I'm lazy, I'm going to get rid of the reasons you won't make a deal first. I will make tactical choices knowing how the emotions run through the brain. So we take empathy, which is just a recognition of what emotions are going on. In the last 40 years, we've learned how to dial different things down and up. Is it manipulative? Is respect manipulative? Is appreciation manipulative? Are manners manipulative? Not the issue of whether or not it's manipulative. How many of you got one of these? But wait a minute, they're really bad people that use these. Don't you feel it's morally wrong to use a phone because bad people use a phone? Well, it's the same thing with the negotiation tools. It's not that the tools, not the manipulation is bad, it's why you're trying to manipulate somebody. Trying to manipulate somebody into a bad deal, then that's immoral. Trying to keep somebody on track while you're moving them to the home of their dreams is a completely separate issue. Fair enough?
So, oftentimes they're in a situation where they're representing a buyer who wants to buy a property.
Right.
And there's a listing agent on the other side. From your perspective, how are you going to approach that negotiation? How are you going to prepare yourself? What are you going to be thinking about as you enter into that negotiation?
I want the listing agent to see me as a straight shooter. Which means I want them to feel like we've got a good working relationship, but that I'm not necessarily going to get pushed around. We're going to be very collaborative. As long as we're collaborative, things are going to go wonderful. But I know at certain points in time I'm going to have to draw boundaries. I'm going to have to say no. I'm going to say no. If I have to say no, I'll let it out a little at a time. I'll say it very gently. I want to be able for people to feel respected and appreciated, and also that I've said no to them in certain ways. I want empathy established as a 2-way street. I'm going to exercise empathy because I want it back from them. And I want to get us to the point where we've got a working relationship where we can solve the actual problems, and nobody's afraid of cooperating. And so then, because I'm going to want to communicate through the agent to the other side, and I'm going to do that in a variety of ways, some of which is I'm going to say things to the agent that I will want them to say word for word for the other side, but I don't want them to know that I did that to them. And I will use something we call the secret to getting the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. Like if I see something that's going to be a problem, I'm going to say, how's that going to work? Enough times till the agent says it to themselves, and the agent finally sends it to the seller. And so it's a constant communication flow. I'm going to try to get going between everybody.
And how would you communicate to someone that you are a straight shooter and you're not going to be pushed around? How would you do that specifically?
I'm not going to be afraid to say negative things to them, but I'm never going to say anything negative that I haven't given them a little bit of warning on. Like a real counterintuitive. If I have something to say to you that I know that you're not going to like, I'm going to say, you're not going to like this. And I'll say it. And I'm going to use an apology strategically. I never apologize at the end. After I've said something they don't like, I'll say, I'm sorry, you're not going to like this. And then I will finish. We got something we like to call the Oprah rule. When's the last time you heard about Oprah having a very public fight with anybody? What? Her 17-year booker, a friend of mine here in town, same thing we did in hostage negotiation. We controlled the end of every conversation. Controlled the end of the conversation, not the beginning. Oprah's rule and her booker's rule was they always made sure when people left, they were happy when they left. So if I have to confront you in our negotiation, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, this is going to sound harsh, I'm going to tell you what it is, and the last thing I'm going to say is, I want us to be successful together. And that's a specific sequencing of psychological impacts that I've had on him. Finishing with a statement that, for lack of a better term, is nurturing. Not apologetic, not disingenuous in any way. I want us to be successful. I want us to make this deal. And the Oprah rule, because the last impression is the lasting impression, the last impression is the lasting impression. My mother always taught me, if you don't make a good first impression, you might not get a chance to make a second one. And I never paid attention to the last impression. The last impression is the lasting impression because I'm going to need to talk to you on the phone again. And the last thing that I say will ring in your ears. And the last thing I said was, I want us to be successful together. That means he'll pick up the phone and he'll listen to me next time I have to talk, and he'll think of me like, he didn't let me get hit with any surprises. He saw there was a problem coming. He let me know what the problem was, and I feel like working with him again. And that's how and he'll never know that because the last thing I said to him was, I want us to be successful together.
So let me add a few more variables in the mix. I'm representing a buyer. You have the listing agent. You have other buyers that are going to be bidding on the property also. So there's other agents trying to get the attention of the listing agent, and the listing agent isn't communicating. They're saying as little as possible. So you're representing a buyer, there are other buyers bidding on the property, and the listing agent is being non-communicative. How would you navigate in that situation?
Probably the first thing I try is, if you're being not communicative, then that means I'd probably send you an email that says, have you given up on doing business with me?
Okay.
Remember, have you given up on seeing the Republicans back in the White House in November? Have you given up on one-line email, nothing more? You'd be stunned at how quickly you get responses from that. I mean, be ready to get a response as soon as 3 minutes, probably no more than an hour. Usually instantaneously when people see that, because you'd be stunned at what people say no to. Stunned. Secondly, if you're being non-communicative with me, then you probably don't feel heard. In our interaction, whatever time we were together, I was probably trying to get you to say yes the whole time, which means I just put myself in the category of everybody else. There's a pretty good chance you don't remember me. I worked really hard to remember you. Steve, how you doing, Steve? What's going on today, Steve? How the kids, Steve? How's the wife, Steve? Steve. But the reverse is, I'm Chris. And I'm working on behalf of a couple of people, Bill and Kathy from Iowa. Bill and Kathy have been trying to come to LA their entire life. They heard this is a place to be. What I'm doing now is I'm personalizing and becoming memorable. Instead of me getting to know you, you're getting to know us. Little increments here and there, every step of the way. You're getting to know us, as opposed to me trying to get to know you, or me hammering you with yes. You want to make a deal, don't you? You want to make a lot of money, don't you? And then also, whatever comes out of your mouth, I'm making sure that you know that I heard you. Because if you talk and I don't listen, then I just wasted your time. So why should you talk to me?
I notice that you are very calm. Is that natural? Is that what you've learned to be? You're very patient. You're not trying to rush anything, whereas most salespeople are trying to get it done now, get it done now, get it done now. Any thoughts around that?
No, I've learned it. It's not my natural demeanor. You're one of three types. Every one of you, you're one of three types. It's our caveman wiring. You're fight, flight, make friends. Assertive, friend-oriented, analytical. The flight guy is a very analytical guy. My natural born type is the fight, assertive negotiator. Donald Trump and I are the same type. It's assertive. Everybody's one of those to begin with. The rest of it is learned. You become the best negotiator you could possibly be when you understand which each attributes of the other types make you better. There's no one best type. You begin to learn the friend-oriented people. You're 6 times more likely to make a deal with somebody you like. Us assertives go like, wow, that guy smiles all the time, makes more deals than I do. Maybe I'll smile. So it's learned.
And talk about what's the role of patience in a negotiation?
Patience is a weapon. And just like silence, we call them effective pauses, just slightly being patient. First of all, patience is an advantage because it makes the other side feel less pushed. There's a core need for autonomy. It's one of the fundamental core needs. It's why this country's here, because of our need for autonomy. So the more patient you are, the more the other person feels their autonomy is being respected, the easier it is for them to respond to you. Then also, I had a judge in a trial in New York. He had a great phrase. He used to like to say, we're going to delay things in order to save time. Now, the position I was in with the FBI, overseeing hostage negotiation teams across the United States, I would see a siege in Atlanta and a siege in Portland. And I would see the guys in Atlanta work that siege and be done in 3 hours, and the guys in Portland work it and it would take them 8. The guys in Atlanta were real deliberate, and they didn't rush into anything, and they took their time and talked things out and heard people out. The guys in Portland was, Commander wants to know when we're going to get this done. We got to get this guy out. And they were very direct, and they were very action-oriented. And, let's get the process engaged. Let's get this started. Let's start talking. And I could see the people that were the most direct and the most engaged take twice as long as the people that were the most relaxed.
You seem to say in the book that negotiations are more about emotion than logic and reason.
Right.
How do you see that applying in a real estate negotiation?
All right, so we make decisions based on what we care about, which makes decision making by definition an emotional process. Reason is what we think up after our gut has told us what we want to do. So if you're willing to accept that, then you begin to understand what are one of the principal components of what makes up emotional decision making, that the negatives are 3 times as powerful as the positives. And then the last thing we add in is a hostage negotiator. We always look for what the recent loss was. And as it turns out, the dominating theory of how the biggest, not the only factor, but the biggest factor is people's fear of loss. And they want, Danny Kahneman, who wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, won a Nobel Prize for that. So if I understand loss as an issue and I understand with these tools how to navigate them, and then when I hear people saying something that is contradictory to what they really want, which happens all the time, then I'll say something like, well, somebody says, well, I can't give you the listing because my brother-in-law is a real estate agent. So it sounds to me like your relationship with your brother-in-law is more important to you than selling the house. That's a hostage negotiation skill. But that was a label. That was a hostage negotiation skill.
So tell me if there's a difference here. In that situation, a script in real estate, so a realtor would say in that, so what's more important to you? Your relationship with your brother-in-law or getting your home sold for the highest price? Is that different than what you just said in any way?
The differences are, and they're two, depending upon a person's brain, I either get through quicker with a question or I get through quicker with the tool that I just used, which was a label. And so there are some people that when asked questions, because hostage negotiators gather information, but I don't always gather information by asking questions. I want you to give me an unguarded and an honest response. You're less likely to give me an unguarded and honest response as a result of a question, even a what question, which is a very good question. The bread and butter of your question should be what and how. But some people immediately get their back up and they become guarded with questions. So instead of saying, you know, what's more important, you selling a house or your relationship with your brother-in-law, I've just observed the dynamic that's taking place.
So what you're telling me is?
Well, I would say...
No, you said...
Sounds like.
It sounds like, yeah.
It sounds like your relationship with your brother-in-law is more important than selling a house. Or it sounds like you're willing to leave money on the table in order to preserve your relationship.
And so now we're getting to know. That's another way to get to know,
right.
Correct?
Right, yeah.
Because then the natural response would be, no, that's
I'm not doing that. Yeah, exactly. And then they feel in control. And they feel protected. And they don't understand where the feeling of control came from and the feeling of protection came from. But subconsciously, they know it came from you. So now when you're in the trust business, they connect feelings of being protected with the sound of your voice, reading your name, and seeing your face.
You said each word has a different emotional impact.
Right.
Can you say more about that?
Well, I and you, I is self-centered, you is a provocation. Good or bad, depending upon the context. I like the word I a lot when I'm getting ready to be assertive, and I'll say I'm sorry. And then I'll be assertive. We use empathy so we can be assertive. And it's an empathic way. I won't be assertive and then apologize. That's bad time. I won't say, we can't do this, I'm sorry. I'll say, I'm sorry, we can't do this. I know the sequencing of the emotional impacts. So use I when I need to be. I is usually used best when you're saying no or setting a boundary.
So, all right, this is important. We can't do this, I'm sorry, versus I'm sorry, we can't do this.
Right, apologize first.
And that can change the whole, what you're saying is that can change the whole dynamic
right.
of a negotiation, just that
right.
switching of words.
Yeah, absolutely. Two reasons. First of all, if you apologize before they know what you're apologizing for, they go like, well, you're sorry, which means boom, you got instant attention. Anytime that you provoke someone into attention, your words automatically have more weight. Also, when you say I'm sorry first, as fast as the mind works, they run through the entire gamut. They don't know what it's going to be. You know, I'm sorry, they think you're going to say your home's being foreclosed on, the FBI has a warrant for your arrest, and your children are in jail. So in that moment, also, knowing how the brain works negatively, then whatever I say after that's probably going to be relief. Different context, but same analogy. I got a woman who's working in a business where she wants some time off, and they're short-handed, and they've had people quit. She goes into the boss and she says, I'm sorry, I got some really bad news for you. He goes, you're going to quit? She said, no, I just need some extra time off. She said, oh, thank God. Yeah, you got it. So I know how the sequencing works. So if you know how it works, why don't you use it? It's understanding how it works and then changing the sequencing around.
How do you balance tactical empathy with them getting to know you? Is there a contradiction there, or is that a competing?
No, I want both things to happen at the same time. What I want them to get to know from me is that they could trust me, and that I'm a straight shooter. And if I get bad news, I'm not going to hide it from them, because that just builds much more trust.
So how do you build trust? What are some of the things that enables you to build trust with someone you're dealing with?
Okay, right off the bat, we do what's called a cold read. And we never say, I understand, ever. But we'll say, all right, so if I met you for the first time, I'll say, this is a situation you find yourself in. This is what the real estate market looks like today. This is the challenges that are being faced by buyers and sellers. Here's where some of the problems are. Here's the problems that happen every single time. If you navigate these with a certain amount of time, this is how it's going to go. And what's that done is immediately it showed that you know something about the market. And you probably say, if you're first time, I'm going to tell you what you're thinking. I will do a read of the situation of you, and I will tell you what it is. Initially, one or two things happen. Either they say, wow, this person really knows what they're talking about, or they go, no, this is what it is. Here's what you need to understand, which means you have when they correct you, you have an instant collaboration going on. Then when you listen, now they feel this great sense of trust and predictability as much as anything else. I don't want surprises.
As a football player, and you know a little bit about that, right? I was trained to read, react,
right,
and then close.
Right.
And reading a lot was about being prepared, being able to size up a situation quickly.
Right.
And that meant I had to study formations, down and distance, tendencies, all those things. So the moment I lined up in a quick second, I'm flipping through. I'm reading fast through. Okay, this is what I think is going to happen.
Right.
Then the play starts, and then I've got to react. I have an assignment. I've got to do my assignment, and if as a linebacker, if the gap opens up, I've got to shoot the gap and make the play. Is there a similar pattern that happens in a negotiation?
Yeah, I would say almost word for word. I mean, you take what you've known, you read it, you make some predictions, and then you're prepared to adapt. There's a Colin Powell phrase, never let your ego get so tied to a position that if the position collapses, your ego goes with it. So when you do a read, you can't say it's going to happen like this. Because when it veers, your ego is tied to that it wanted to go a certain way. When I was doing kidnapping negotiation, I got to the point where I used to think, all right, there's only about 5 different ways this could possibly go. Whichever one it is, I'll go with it. I've seen it.
Now, before you went into a negotiation, did you have that talk with yourself? This is what I think can happen here?
I take a rough read of the situation, yeah. And there are few situations that you go into that even if you've never seen it before, you can start making some pretty good guesses. And so, all right, so somebody's selling a home. Are they going to be emotional? Yes. If it was my first day as a real estate agent, and it was the first person that I ever spoke to, I'd look at him and I'd say, selling your home's got to be an emotional process. Day one. That's all I know. So once you can start adding to your read, adding to your depth of experience, and then empathy is recognition and articulation. So you're going back and you're seeing what you recognize, and then you're articulating it. Does that answer your question?
Yes. How do you train yourself? Because what I hear with realtors all the time, they're always trying to use logic. They're always trying to use facts and convincing someone of their argument.
Right.
Rather than you talk about, trying to find out what the emotion is underlying the situation.
Right.
And all this triggers back to your first example of how you do it. It's really awkward at first because everyone's got these habits that they're so tied into. Everyone in the room, they basically negotiate on autopilot. Would you agree? They do the same things.
You go back to your habits.
Over and over again?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you start to unwind these habits, just like up here, saying, what I think I hear you saying versus you seem to say.
Right.
Just that little thing. You have to consciously think about using the word you versus I. How do you, in all your training, how do you get people to start doing things differently that feel awkward, uncomfortable, and a lot of it seems very counterintuitive?
Right. Yeah. It is counterintuitive.
And here you are, you're going into a negotiation. This is how you get paid, and now you're going to do something that feels awkward, counterintuitive. That's a big leap. Yes or no?
It's a big leap if you look at it all at once.
Okay.
So how do you break it down? What do you do to break it down? You pick a skill, and on a day when you haven't got a lot at stake. Which, all right, so if you're not negotiating with sellers or buyers on a Monday, whatever. On Monday, all day long, no matter what happens, I'm going to let the other person talk first, and I'm just going to try to paraphrase everything I hear. It's a low-stakes day. What this gets into is a rule, I call it the rule of 67. Somewhere between 1 and 67 tries, you're going to get it. And if you try it, and if you just spend a day doing it, you probably get 20 tries in that day. And so we'll pick different negotiation skills, and I'll tell them today's paraphrase day. You're not allowed to do anything other than paraphrase everybody you talk to today, all day long, and do it in a low-stakes day when you're not negotiating a deal of your life. By the end of the day, you're going to be like, wow, that was a cool day. I get stuff out of people I never expected to get out of them. And that's how you get it. It comes to you very quickly. The other thing that you have to watch out for, though, is it's a perishable skill. It's a skill, it's not riding a bike. So it requires a certain amount of maintenance afterwards. You can't just acquire it and say, well, I can label whenever I feel like it. You have to still be able to use these skills in your everyday conversations so that when you're talking to a seller or a buyer, then the recognition comes.
So how many hostage negotiators are there in the country? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I got a rough idea, and how many of them with experience, and what kind of experience there are. At any given point in time, the FBI's got about 400. NYPD has about 400. LAPD probably has, their negotiators and their swatters are dual hats. So there's a lot of them, but since there's so many of them, not that many of them actually get to do real life negotiations.
And is there do they have to go through training, or can anyone just be a hostage negotiator?
Yeah, you got to go. Every agency has their own training requirements. The FBI provides training to law enforcement for free, so the vast majority of hostage negotiators in the U.S. have been trained by the FBI.
And what have you've taught a lot of classes now. What have you learned about people and their natural tendencies towards negotiating versus what you think would be more effective?
There's a couple natural tendencies that get in the way. If you're control-oriented, that gets in your way.
They're all control freaks, by the way.
If you're uncomfortable, we'll be uncomfortable. Two out of three people are very uncomfortable with silence and they can't keep quiet. That's a problem. You have to be comfortable with silence. Some people are scared to learn. They're afraid that it's an admission of weakness or vulnerability, and they don't want to admit that they need to learn more stuff. Those kind of things get in our way.
You talked about this addiction to yes, which right here in the room. Are you saying that first you want to get to know in order to then have the possibility to get to yes, or are you trying to get to a no in the beginning?
Depending upon how clouded the other person's thought patterns are. Like if I'm talking to somebody that I could see, like if somebody's not listening at all, then I'll get you to say no a couple times because it'll startle you. And it'll break you out of this internal thought pattern. And then at that point in time, what I'm going to go for after that is I'm going to try to say a couple things to you that you'll be surprised in a really good way that I noticed. You know, and I'll say, it sounds to me like this is really weighing heavily on your mind. Sounds to me like, it looks to me like you got a lot on your plate. You know, I'll do a read of your body language when I come up and the look on your face to see if I can get a feeling of what mood you're in. And my first thing to you, I might say like, long day.
Is it beneficial when you're going into a negotiation to think about why the deal won't work?
I'll look for why you think it won't work.
Okay.
Because why you think it won't work is going to be the most important thing. So I'm going to be looking for reluctance and hesitation. Like if for some reason, if you accidentally ask somebody a question where you're trying to get them to say yes, and they go, okay, stop right there. There's a hole to dive down into. Because the other thing that happens when someone gives you a hesitation in their tone of voice at all is they're hoping you pick up on it. They're hoping that you hear it. And if you gloss over what you just taught them was you're not listening.
In the book, you talk about you're right versus that's right.
Yeah.
This is a you're right kind of crowd. That's
right
the kiss of death, yes?
The kiss of death. The absolute, somebody looks at you and says, you're right. We say that when we're talking to people that we want to maintain a relationship with and we want them to shut up and go away. And within my company, we have a working joke that when we say you're right, you're really saying F you to the other person. And I'm having a discussion again with my director of operations a few months ago, and he's just hammering me on something, and finally, and he was so passionate about it, finally I just said to him, you're right, and then he went, okay. But you're right is really bad. It's bad. It's what people say to you when they want you to stop talking.
Chris, thank you. Great job. Thank you.